Hello, this is Chris with Holt Family Farm, and today we're going to talk about breeding Coturnix quail. So first we're going to talk about where you get your eggs. You're either going to get your eggs from ordering them online, get them from Craigslist and pick them up from somebody, or you're going to have adult quail and collect your own eggs. If you collect your eggs, they can be collected up to 7 days before you have to put them in an incubator. If you get them from the mail, you're going to want to wait until at least 24 hours after you receive them. So you want to let them rest before you put them in the incubator. If you look here, when you store your eggs, you're going to want to store them so the pointy end's down. So make sure all your eggs are with pointy end down. You're going to put them in the container, and then what I do is you want to keep them at 55 to 65 degrees. You don't want to put them in a refrigerator, but what I do is I get an ice pack and I put the ice pack in the refrigerator, and then I put my eggs inside a small cooler. I seal this up, and then what I do with my eggs inside, and I just put them in there every day, and then what I do is I take a small cart and I put them on there like this. So in the morning I will rotate them like this, and then after I collect the eggs and put the new eggs in here, I rotate it this way and leave it like that during the day. And then at night, before I go to bed, I go ahead and rotate it back like that. And what that does is tilts the eggs so you want them stirred a little bit before you incubate them. So now for the incubator, for the eggs, I forgot. When you're collecting eggs, if you buy them, you might as well put them all in there because you paid for them. You never know. But if you're collecting your own eggs, and you know you're going to be able to put, mine holds 120 eggs at one time. I get about 2 dozen eggs a day, so I have plenty of eggs. I can throw eggs away, or not throw them away, but I can use for other purposes. But I always keep my best eggs. I'm going to see right here. Like this right here is an abnormally sized quail egg, and that's probably a double, maybe even a triple yolker there. And I wouldn't use this one because the viability is unlikely. So you want to pick yours. I do pick out colors because tends to be if this hatches out, it'll lay the same color. So if you like blue eggs, you can do that. But for the most part, you just find the eggs that look the cleanest and aren't cracked, and you put those in there, and the freshest eggs. So the next thing you do is after you've hold them and you've collected your eggs and you've got them there, is you set up your incubator. I use the farm incubator. I have one that has a circulating fan, so that's what I'm going to explain to you. I don't use the ones without a fan, and this is how I do it, so I'm going to explain my methods. But I like to get one with a circulating fan. It makes things a lot easier. But it sets up with this. It does do chickens, and you change out the tray, but this is a quail trays for the turner, and you can have chicken eggs in here, duck eggs in here, and it's programmable to the different things. Quail eggs take 18 days, and they can take anywhere from 16 to 20 days to hatch out the eggs, versus chicken eggs, which are 21 days. So you can set the parameters on here so it changes it. The temperature is the same for all the poultry, is all 100 degrees, give or take. And 3 days before they hatch, you want to lock them down, which for quail would be at day 15. And I'll explain lockdown in a second. But the setup, you put your turner inside your thing, you turn it on, you get your temperature set. And then what you got to do is there's a plug hole here, and what I use is a turkey baster, and I just cut the end of the bulb off, and that way I can stick that in here and pour the water into here. Just tilt that and it'll fill it up. If you do it any other way, it's just a mess, but this seemed to work really good and easy for me. So I can pour, I think it takes a half a cup in the front, and you just fill it up a little bit. I do what's called a dry incubation, which is you want to keep humidity about 45%, and you keep that all the way until lockdown. When you get to lockdown, that's where you jump the humidity up to 75 to 85%. And there's a hole in the back where you can add more water back here. So So you just take the same thing, you stick the probe in there, or the turkey baster in there, and fill up the back canals, and that'll do it. And what I do before I start, if you look here, in here, on this, there's a grit out here that you're supposed to, that they'll, when you pull the egg turner out, the quail will hatch out, the eggs will hatch out on that material. What I do is I take wet, damp paper towels and I lay it down all over the surface of that for two reasons. One, it's easier to clean, and two, the chicks are going to be able to get better footing, so they're not going to spray a leg. You have problems with chicks where their legs spread out and then they tear their tendons or something and they can't walk right. I don't have any problem with that. I put it in there, and the other thing is they're going to go to the bathroom in there, and it kind of absorbs some of the smell too, because they're going to have like just like a baby, a human baby, where they have like this green stool right out the beginning before they have regular stools. But it'll be a mess in there, and because quail tend to hatch over a couple day period, it's going to be a little messy in there, and you got a lot of little chicks in there when they all hatch. Once you open this up the first time, you're not going to get very many hatching after that. So with quail, they're very sensitive to opening up the incubator. So I don't open it up until day 2. They can be in there for 48 hours without having to be removed. So this right here is a turner. I don't even tell people about how to do it without a turner because it's just insane. These aren't that expensive. It's worth every penny to get a turner, so it turns it automatically for you. If you turn it, I think it's like 4 or 5 every 3 or 4 hours, and that's including at nighttime. So you got to be turning. That's insane for 3 weeks. No, I got a turner. Like I said, it holds 124. These machines are notorious for the temperatures to be out of whack. So I always tell people, get yourself a second hydrometer temperature gauge, so which is what I have here. And then I use a baby doll thermometer here, because on the back side of it, it has a little wrench where I can adjust it. And how you calibrate these is you stick them in ice water, and they should be 0, and you can adjust it with that little nut on the back so it reads 0. Then you stick it in 100-degree boiling water, and it'll be 100 degrees in the boiling water, and then you can look at it. If it says it's 100 degrees, that means it's zeroed in. And then I stick that in this hole over here. I stick this probe in this hole over here, and make sure they're reading. Since this one's the calibrated one, it's accurate. I base the other two off of this one, but this one's hard to read. These are nicer to read, so that's why I use them. And this doesn't have a hydrometer in it, and that's how you do that. So for the lockdown, what the lockdown is, at day 15, you're going to take your egg turner out. You're going to take all the eggs out of the egg turner. You're going to set them down in the incubator. Then you're going to put the lid in. You put the lid back on with this out, and probably within like a day to 2 days, you'll start getting hatchlings. Resist the temptation of opening up the incubator. If you open up the incubator, you throw off the humidity, and it can actually cause the membrane inside the egg to shrink and kill the chick inside. That's why once you open it up the first time to get all the chicks out, they usually don't. You don't get as many hatching after that. And I get about a 80%, give or take 5% on most of my hatches. So, but they all usually hatch within the first. You only get a couple after the first batch hatches in a row, and do that. And that's where that paper towel really comes in handy. And keep it up to 85. So the lockdown, you're going to pull that out, switch it in there, bump the humidity from 45 up to 75, 85. Some people say you get it up too high, it's thing, but I've never had a problem. I've had it where it looked like it was raining in there, and I never had any problem with drowning chicks or anything like that. And maybe the paper towel being in there helped with the moisture or whatever, but I've never had any issues with that. This right here is a homemade candler. It's got a light bulb in there, and you just set the egg on here. I only use that for chickens. People say you can do it with quail eggs, but they're so dark, I've never been able to really tell. They have a thicker membrane, so they don't usually explode. They'll just crack a little bit. So I don't really worry about it, and I've only had one egg out of all the times I've done it, only one egg has been rotten, and I didn't smell it. It just, when I went to clean out the thing, the egg had solidified and was in the egg handler, so, and it was cracked, so I knew that it was bad. So that's that. So you're gonna get them, you know, day 20, I go ahead and just pull everything out, and the chicks and everything. So the chicks are gonna go from there into the brooder. And if you look here, I showed some of the different types of brooders. You can use a one you made yourself. This is similar to the type that I made for mine. I didn't use a steel one, but I have a plastic bin that you just put a crate over it. And then these ones here are a little more professional made ones. And what you're gonna need for those is you wanna keep the temperature at 95 degrees when they first go in there, and then -5 degrees every week until you get them ready to go out. And the week, they're gonna stand there for 4 weeks until they get feathered out. And at week 3, you pull the heat and let them just naturally go, because when you put them outside, that'll climatize them to the outside. But I will, and then the other things you're gonna need is you're gonna need a heater. The heat source can either be everybody's going to these new hot plate things. They're very pricey, and you have to get big ones or a bunch of them, because all the chicks have got to fit underneath it. I just use the hanging light. I have a chain, and that way I can adjust the height and, you know, closer if you need hot, warmer. And that's those. They say these are fire hazards, but I hang mine from a chain so it's not touching anything, so it's not a problem. Then you're going to need a feeder and a water. The feeder, you can use the same feeder you use for chicks, but for the water, you definitely want to use one made for quail, which is a lot smaller, because they do, when they're little, they can drown. So if you use a little one, they can't fall in. If you use the chicken one, you can use marbles. I did that, but the problem is when you go to change the water out, it's a real pain in the butt to clean everything. I just go with the little ones. They only cost, I think they're $2 at Tractor Supply for just the, you can use the same top, but the bottom is $2 for that. So that's what I use. So what I can tell you with the brooder is, the brooder, when you get them out there and you put them out there, for the water, I use well water that I have. I use chlorine, and I just put in, I forget, I think it's 1:32 ratio, but but anyway, I put a little bit of chlorine in there, and that kills, and I just use bleach from the laundry, and that kills your bacteria and all the stuff in there, so the water's clean for them. Some people use apple cider vinegar that's been unfiltered, and some people also use a mixture of a little bit of honey and turmeric or garlic, and the apple cider vinegar mixed in with the water the first day or so with the chicks. I don't do that. I don't have any problems, but some people do that, so that's a possibility. I do have some electrolyte packs that I would use if I had some sick-looking chicks. I might use that for them, but for the most part, just regular water. When you put the water in there, you're going to want to dip their beaks in it so they know where it's at. And you don't have to do every single chick. If you do a couple of them, the rest of them will figure out once they see the other ones drinking the drink. But I dip all mine in. But there's like 100 of them, so it takes a little while, but I do it. The feed I don't worry about. When you put the feed in, you want to use crumbles. There's a lot of stuff on the internet about coffee grinders and having to grind all the material because they can't, they're so little. Day one, mine eat the crumbles. I've never had any losses because of that, and they eat it, plenty of it. What I do is I put a wood block in the bottom of the brooder, and I pour a little bit of feed on top of that, or I also have the water collection on the bottom of the clay planter pots that you use for your plants. I may put one of those down, and then I put feed in there. That way they don't have to reach down into the feeder little holes and figure it out when they're real little, because they are so small. So I just put it on the board, and they eat off the board, and I do that for a couple days. And within the first week, they're so big from when they were little that they can eat out of the feeder. And if I start noticing them eat out of the feeder, then I'll stop feeding on that little board. But I do that. That's it for the feed. You definitely want to use at least 24%. The higher the better. I use 28% protein, and it's a game bird starter that I use, and it works really well. And I use that for my birds all the way through. The higher protein seems the better off they are. And So for the heat, a lot of people get wrapped up on the thermometer. I used to do the same thing. I had a little thermometer in there, had to make sure it was 95, everything was stable. I don't do that anymore. I know roughly where the heater needs to go. I put it in there, I put the chicks in there, I wait a little bit, I come back and look. If they're all huddled underneath the light, then they're cold, and that means I need to lower the heat. If they are all spread out against the wall away from the light, then that means it's too hot and I gotta raise the light farther away from the brooder. And if they're kind of dispersed all over and evenly, then that means that I've got it in the right spot. And I just leave it in there, and then just gradually, after they start getting feathers, I start moving it up. And most of that's indicated by they'll start staying away from the heat more and more. And when they do, they don't need the heat. So I do that. At about week 4, they're going to be fully feathered. Once they're fully feathered, they can go outside. I pull the heat at week 3. Week 4, they're fully feathered. They go out into my grow out pens, which are outside, and with the rest of the quail. And I have an outdoor quail hutch, and so they'll go out where the breeders are at, but they're in grow out. They're in their separate pens, and I put them in there. And then I wait another week or 2 weeks until I start hearing the males crow, and the females will start laying eggs. So they lay eggs for anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks. They'll start laying the eggs. Once they do that, then it's easy to sex them. I breed multiple colored quail, so you can't necessarily sex them by the look of them. Supposedly the brown Coturnix have speckles all the way down. That's the female, and the males have kind of a red chest like a robin. Not quite as red as a robin, but it's a reddish chest and it doesn't have speckles going down past the neck on the breast. But I have tuxedos, and I have some Texas A&Ms and some mixes and Tibetans, and their colors you can't do that with. So how I sex them is you can either watch them. If they crow, then it's a rooster. If they lay an egg, it's a hen. But I do vent sexing, which is if you flip them over, and on the male right by the tail, if you feel there's a little nodule, and if you push down on that, foam will come out of the vent, and that's what tells you that you have a male. If there's no bulb back there and it doesn't push any white foam out, then it's a female. And I'll sex them and like I said, at about 6 to 8 weeks, I'll sex them. Probably 7 weeks is when I do it. And then I separate my males. I have 2 grow out pens. I put the males in one, females in the other. And then I'll select from them if I want to keep any to replace mine. Quail tend to start losing their fertility after a year, and in 2 years they really start losing their fertility. So I don't keep anything over a year. I go ahead and replace everything a year to 2 years. I'll replace them. As far as collecting eggs, once you have your own quail, I've never noticed a dropout on eggs. Some people say during the winter they'll drop down on their egg laying, but I don't have that problem during the winter. They say if you add in light so that they have 14 hours of light, that keeps them laying, but I haven't really had a problem with that. So have any other questions, please leave in the comments, and I'll try to answer those or make another video. I'll probably go in a little more depth about a few other things. I think I hit everything. Thank you very much. If you like what you saw, please subscribe.